Speaking on Srila Prabhupada's Disappearance Day is bitter and sweet. Not bitter, of course, materially. It's just that there is separation, and we are accustomed to physical association. But we're dealing with the spiritual reality. We're spirit souls having a human experience, as I often say. We're not human beings having a spiritual experience, although we may act like that sometimes. It's hard for you all to understand, but during Prabhupada's presence, and I'm especially speaking about 1976, even 1977, almost every devotee never thought that Prabhupada would depart from our physical presence. He had gone through health crises before and always emerged on the other side. So we were like children in our teenage years, and we're just accustomed to the Father always being there. If you listen to Srila Prabhupada's lectures and morning walks in 1976, just 1 year or a little bit more before his departure, sometimes, like in France, you would hear him coughing and coughing and coughing. But overwhelmingly, you get the impression of someone with unlimited energy who never tires of speaking about Krishna and convincing human beings that their stay in their body is temporary and they better become Krishna conscious before the next change of the body comes. We miss that kind of reframing of existence that Prabhupada was so expert at. He never let up, day after day, morning after morning, walk after walk, class after class. You have to change your body. What will your next body be? I wonder, thinking out loud only, how devotees today would handle that kind of relentless torrent. Our Western psychology, for most of us, would probably not be able to handle it day after day, year after year. Because we want to see our future as vast, with room for so much expansion. We want to see that we have the years in life for accomplishing our purposes, and to be constantly told that you're not going to get any more material happiness or distress than what is already predestined, to be constantly told that any moment you can leave your body, what will your next body be? Oh, I wonder if devotees today could handle that kind of torrent, that kind of flood, day after day, walk after walk. Of course, because of Srila Prabhupada's presence, that kind of relentless torrent was blissful. But when you think about what he's saying and apply what he's saying, your life has to change if you're really taking it seriously. And there's something in us that fights back, especially now that Prabhupada is not physically present. we've got some breathing room. We feel that within bhakti, we can kind of do our thing, which is true. But for those who want to take their Prabhupada straight on, take it straight on the head, you can't help but think how my conceptions of the world, how my conceptions of my life are totally unrealistic and perverted, distorted. Prabhupada had that kind of Shaktivation empowerment that would bring about such a transformation in persons in terms of what am I living for and what am I trying to accomplish in my life. He didn't just kind of add a few dabs of bhakti on the side. He was a full-on spiritual revolutionary who knew where he's from, Vaikuntha. He knew the spiritual world exists. He knew Krishna's Supreme Personality Godhead. Oh, I was listening to him roar throughout 1976. All fools, all rascals, day after day. You might, these days, we probably want to say, although we wouldn't say it out loud, Prabhupada, please be non-sectarian. Please be open to everyone and everything. Be more universal. Sometimes it's said amongst devotees that it was the disciples of Prabhupada who were young, who took his statements and message to an extreme. That's true to some extent, but in our attempt to, how do we say, tidy up Prabhupada and make him fit into the present worldview or our own view, we shouldn't overlook the fact that he could push the tables over. You may remember from Western movies in the saloons and when the cowboys would have an argument, before they started shooting one another, they would push over the table that was, with the drinks on it and the food on it. They would just push it over. So Prabhupada would regularly do that. You can't make him conform to a particular pigeonhole, a particular niche. Sometimes he would be very cooperative in terms of what we would say mainstream understanding, but many times no. So the debate is always there. Do we have the realization to act in that way? And should we try to follow in those footsteps? Or is that just a false imitation? The jury is out. I won't present a conclusion. But we should be aware that Prabhupada could be very uproarious when seen from the ordinary material perspective. He knew he had Krishna's backing 100%. And so he was determined to make as much impact in the world as Krishna would let him for Krishna's pleasure. He was going for it, full on, day after day, month after month, year after year. As much as Krishna is allowing him to bite off and chew, he would go for it. And in the process, see how much Krishna is going to let him do. So there was always this dynamic between Prabhupada and Krishna. Just like Prabhupada wanted to stay in Los Angeles and make Los Angeles the world headquarters. But then there was this internal disruption in ISKCON, which caused him pain. And he went before the deities, Sri Sri Rukmini Dwarkadesh in Los Angeles. And they told him, we've got better things, in so many words. We've got better plans for you, better things for you to do. So that's when Prabhupada returned in full force to India. He always said that his Guru Maharaj instructed him to preach in the Western world, especially English-speaking countries. But he was going to add on to that because he'd already fulfilled his Guru Maharaj's instruction. So he was going to add on to that by redeeming India. So one of my godbrothers and I were discussing, I was discussing with Burijan Prabhu. He has a statement about mythologizing Prabhupada, making him very, according to our material conceptions, very tidy in the material sense, non-controversial, non-uproarious. Making him fit in. And the point is often made, as I said, that it was the disciples of Prabhupada who bent things out of shape. There's a bit of truth to that. We were all young, but Prabhupada knew how to rev us up. He knew how to get things going. I remember in Los Angeles, sitting before him in Bhagavatam class, and Prabhupada had heard that there was a very popular book at the time, kind of a pop psychology book, a kind of book that later would be classified as New Agey. So the name of the book was I'm Okay, You're Okay. So Prabhupada brought it up in class. I've heard about this book. I'm okay, you're okay. That is not our position. We say we are okay and you are not okay. All the devotees, of course, Jai Prabhupada. So it wasn't just the devotees who were kind of beating that drum. And then you would hear morning walk after morning walk, devotees would bring up this material conception, that material conception, this person, this materialist says this bogus yogi says that. And you just hear just like a Kali Yuga person would just curse every other sentence. Say something unprintable, unspeakable every other sentence when asked for a response. Prabhupada would just, fools and rascals, all fools and rascals. You bring up this politician, you bring up this yogi, all fools and rascals, over and over and over again. So this is the Prabhupada that we may want to forget. And so I was speaking with my godbrother, and he was saying that it's like devotees want to turn Prabhupada into a combination of Buddha, Saint Francis. But Prabhupada did his own thing as the representative of the spiritual world. He's not theoretical. When he says all fools and rascals, when he says we're okay and you're not okay, he's speaking from the 100% spiritual platform. He's not compromising because he's seeing and living the spiritual reality. You have to think about that and how crucial it is. He's not speaking theology. He's not speaking philosophy as we normally think philosophy is. He's not like presenting some kind of Vedanta society discourse. He's seeing Krishna. He's experiencing the spiritual world. That's his home. And so he doesn't have any reason to check himself. So those are some thoughts that come to me today about Srila Prabhupada. He could push over all the tables, no matter what was on top of the table. People would think, oh, there's a nice dinner on the table, nice drinks. Never mind. All fools, all rascals. So was he just being irritable? Was he just being someone from India who didn't recognize what a successful civilization was in the West? No, he's being 100% true to Krishna. Now, I'm not advocating that we should imitate, nor am I saying that we should overlook what he did. It's something to always think about as we try to be more Krishna conscious. So 1976, even 1977, I last saw Prabhupada in India in March and April of 77. He didn't come down often to give talks, to give class. We heard he was ill, but he had been in and out of illness for years, ever since he came to the USA. What to speak of even being on the Jaladuta before arriving in the USA. He had heart attacks. So I guess you could say we took it to be normal. Prabhupada gets illness, and then the next day he's more feisty and dynamic than ever. That's what we were used to. And so, yes, I saw him in the last time I saw him, besides Mayapur, was Mumbai in 1977 in April. And of course, he departed in November of 77. But his departure was not on anyone's mind. But even though it turned out to be 7 months later. He was speaking at a pandal, a huge outdoor festival in Mumbai, organized by the temple, the Juhu temple. And what was the theme of the festival, in which they were inviting thousands of people from Mumbai? Thousands came. And what was the theme advertised? The modern civilization is a failure. Prabhupada was going for it, and he had all his devotees, his disciples, going for it too. And I remember those lectures. He was roaring, even though he was now we recognize he was ill. He was roaring like a lion. And he was speaking on verses from Bhagavatam like dogs, hogs, camels, asses. The second canto verses. So he's not being a religious fanatic. He's speaking from 100% realization. He's living the spiritual world. So then, shortly after that, he started manifesting illness more than usual. And around May of 77, the talks amongst those who were with him in Vrindavan was that his departure could be imminent. But it's not that everyone throughout the ISKCON world knew that, or even if they heard it, it's not that they could really process that. Mm. Some or other, from the time he set foot on the Jaladuta through all these health challenges and crises, Prabhupada prevailed. So listening to his lectures, I could see that day after day, he was refocusing the whole human endeavor for anyone who listened to him. Your life is not meant for the way you think. You could die any moment. What will your next body be? What's the use in a temporary achievement which will be lost in a few days? Now, we may say that kind of thing theoretically, or we might sometimes entertain those notions. But to have your whole life shaped by that kind of dynamic day after day, Prabhupada had the power, the spiritual power to bring about that kind of like polar shift in the way you framed your life and what you thought your goals were. In other words, his presentation was, look, you're not going to be around here for long. What are you going to do? What kind of body do you plan to have next? Like, what do you mean I'm not going to be around here for long? That's what we would say these days. What about my life? I've got things to accomplish, things I need to do. I want to feel like I made a contribution. Sometimes Prabhupada was hard as a thunderbolt, sometimes soft as a rose, and you couldn't predict. I remember in Vrindavan, one 7-year-old girl and her mother came to see Prabhupada because the 7-year-old girl had some terminal illness. And Prabhupada, you could say, was completely unsentimental in dealing with the situation. What does it matter if you die after 7 years or you die after 60 years? What's the difference? If any of you heard that these days and responded in your current consciousness of not your current consciousness, the current world consciousness, like, wait a minute now, Prabhupada, be encouraging, show sympathy. He didn't give an inch. He was very grave. We can all leave at any moment. Don't think that one person is bad off because of dying at 7 years old and another person is better for dying at 70 years old. What's the difference? Why don't you do something so you don't die again? You see, it's a total refocusing, a reframing of how you look at life. And it took a person with that kind of power to do this day after day after day. So the question could be, well, with Prabhupada's physical presence gone, how can we retain that kind of focus? It's a high vision. How can we maintain that kind of vigor and laser like analysis? It doesn't seem to be the way for popularity amongst people in general. It doesn't give us much room to, doesn't give us much wiggle room to kind of be wishy-washy. I'm not saying being wishy-washy is always a bad thing, But that's not the point of this presentation. The point that I'm saying is that Mhm. Prabhupada's physical presence is not here. And so how do we maintain that sharpness of analysis, the no nonsense approach to life, which these days can seem a bit tough for us? Some tough chewing gum. Mm, too much, especially for the Western world, too much for the Indian world. It's like chutney. Real good chutney is sweet, but it's too hot to swallow. You'd like to swallow it, but because it's sweet, but then it's so hot. So Prabhupada could be like that, the best chutney. So it wasn't simply when he would say things like he wants all 17 books from the BBT in 2 months. That's a classic challenge. But no, there were, if you wanted to deal with Prabhupada, whether personally or through his instructions, you had to be ready to put it on the line because that's the way he was. And he was looking for persons who would also have that kind of spirit. So, yes, you could say we were young back then. So many Prabhupada disciples, including myself, when we look back on what we did, we said, how did I do all that? I think about some of the things I did, smuggling persons out of East Germany, which is considered the East Germans called it, not considered, legally classified it as kidnapping. Anyone who's aiding and abetting the escape of one of their citizens from East Germany to anywhere, especially to West Germany, was committing the crime of kidnapping. 20-year prison sentence. Looking back, I wonder how did I get into that kind of mindset to put it all on the line for Krishna? I remember the now Krishna Kshetra Swami and I smuggling books into the iron behind the Iron Curtain. I won't describe how we did it. You have to know something about the geography back then, how Berlin was divided and West Berlin was in the middle of East Germany. And anyway, here we were just doing such things as that. But let me give you the other side. I was speaking about this in a seminar for leaders in Russia a month ago or so. And I was telling them how during my BBT days in Los Angeles, I had the unique service of filing Prabhupada's correspondence. That meant all the letters written from him, but also to him. So I got to see both sides of the equation, so to speak. I always tell the story. You've probably heard it before. There I was in my BBT office as the final copy editor for Prabhupada's books. Across the hallway, 2 meters away, was the office of the now Jayadvaita Swami, who was the main editor. And so we had the BBT had a whole building, an apartment building in Los Angeles, where its staff had their offices. And of course, we didn't have any separate living quarters from our offices. When it's time to go to sleep at night, you're in your office at your desk, you just get on the floor, unroll your sleeping bag, and go to sleep. Your office was everything. Beds? Who needs beds? Just give me a sleeping bag and a spot on the floor. I remember because my service was to read 12 hours a day sometimes, minimum 8 hours a day, but often 12 hours reading, watching for any kind of mistake whatsoever. That's like taking a university exam for 8 hours straight every day. Anyway, it kept my mind out of my so one day the door opens to our apartment, our flat, where we had myself, Jayadvaita Swami, Zen Brahmachari, and Sureshwar Das. He was the indexer. Those of you in New Zealand remember Sureshwar's visit. So the door opens, and in comes the BBT trustee then, as well as the GBC of Los Angeles at the time, Rameshwar Prabhu. And he's got in his hands a big, huge cardboard box. And so he walks in and comes to my office. And he tells me very solemnly, and I love he's got a unique New York City accent from a particular part of New York. I don't talk like that, but I'm from New York, but it's quite a common accent. Okay, Dave Amrita, you know what's in this box? In this box are all Prabhupada's letters. I want you to keep these letters safely. They're letters to him and from him from the very beginning. So you please keep them safely with you. And I'm telling you, don't read them. So I mean, I meant it when I told him, all right, whatever you say. I mean, I was being truly, honestly submissive. So then Rameshwar Prabhu left. And as soon as the door closes, as he's gone out of the flat, the apartment, into my room rushes Jayadvaita Das Brahmachari, like a saffron streak making a beeline to my door. And he just looks at me and says, okay, Dave Amrita, let's get into it. Well, what can I say? He's a senior Vaishnav, from the old days. I mean, I just have to follow. I got to follow someone. So he said, let's get into it. So we spent months just plundering the letters, just reading them all. And then finally, after a few months, you see, we would finish our BBT work some days at 6 p.m. And then we would just break out the letters, start reading them. And finally, Jayadvaita Das Brahmachari told me, look, all right, I've heard enough. Here's what I want you to do. You keep on reading them, and whenever you find something noteworthy, you let me know. Call me in. So I saw this one letter written by a senior devotee who had some problems. And he bounced back. So we're all always happy to see when devotees have problems and bounce back. We're very grateful because they've done so much service in many cases, and Maya is strong. And not everyone bounces back in this lifetime. Prabhupada knew that if not this life, if in the future life, they'd bounce back. He had that kind of vision. Therefore, he said he's initiating people on the authority of Narada Muni, who says, even if they go away, that's okay, because whatever service they did will be their eternal asset. So Prabhupada would assert, I'm doing this on the authority of Narada Muni. Even if they come and go, that's okay. They shouldn't go, and they don't have to go, but even if they do, still, in other words, param vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtan. So this leader wrote Prabhupada, this former leader wrote Prabhupada a letter that I want to reestablish myself. And to do that, I need to execute some dangerous service on your behalf. I need to do something going way out on a limb, something risky. And that way I'll recapture Krishna's favor. I'll recapture your blessings. So can you suggest some dangerous duty I can do? At the time, there was the Vietnam War. Maybe go to Vietnam and preach, or sneak into North Vietnam or something like that. And what was Prabhupada's reply? About executing a dangerous mission to reestablish yourself and regain the favor of Krishna. Please kindly attend the morning and evening program. So I'm saying that to balance my presentation, which is stressing an important aspect of Srila Prabhupada that we shouldn't mythologize or wash away. He could turn the tables over. He could turn everything upside down from the ordinary material perspective. We are okay. You are not okay. And he knew what he was doing. He knew how to accomplish his purposes. He knew what's the best thing to say at a particular time for accomplishing his purposes, which are Krishna's purposes. So yes, looking back now, we may want to make him into a tidy package that's acceptable in all ways to society today. But truthfully, let me tell you, it's not going to happen. He is what he is, a pure representative of the spiritual world, a pure resident of the spiritual world, who Krishna sent to us in this world to give us our chance how to go back home, back to Godhead, and to constantly hound us, to constantly remind us that is our purpose. Right now, I'm listening to Prabhupada speaking in Australia, Melbourne, and he was the master of Aussie preaching. He knew, just give it to him, straight and intense. And the media, they would pick up on it most of the time. They one headlines in the Australian newspaper said, Swami is here to hound us. So those attributes of Prabhupada are there. He could be the sweetest gentleman, and he could be like a gunslinger. He could be soft as a rose. Like when the girlfriend of a famous rock singer, she and the rock singer had come to see Prabhupada at the manor. And the rock singer was asking Prabhupada questions, and his girlfriend had on a mini skirt. So, I mean, ladies could imagine what it's like when you're sitting on the floor with a mini skirt on. Because there were no chairs. So she and the rock star boyfriend were sitting on the floor, and there she is sitting on the floor with a mini skirt on. So she had the audacity, when it came time for her to ask a question, she asked, what, a very deep, profound question. why do you all have bare heads? Why are your heads all shaved? And Prabhupada responded, why do you have bare legs? And then he melted her heart by telling her, it's better to have a cool head and warm legs. It was another time in Detroit, at the temple in Detroit, the current temple. A politician came to see Prabhupada. He was an African American politician. He was a member of the state legislature. And so he had seen Prabhupada the year before and was reading Prabhupada's books. And so he came the following year when Prabhupada visited to see Prabhupada. His name was Jackie Vaughn. And Prabhupada was encouraging him. And then before the man left, Prabhupada said, have you been in the temple room? Have you seen the deity? He's black. He's from your community. He kept repeating it. He's from your community. Have you seen him? So those are some points I wanted to share with you on this disappearance day of Srila Prabhupada, which is normally a bittersweet day for me in the spiritual sense. But now by your association, and you helped me to recall those aspects, it helps me to focus on thinking of Srila Prabhupada, remembering him more. So I thank you all for that opportunity. Now I will take your leave. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.